In the late 1970s, the relentless Rhodesian Bush War, a life-or-death conflict between the white minority government of Rhodesia and African nationalist movements, had reached a critical juncture. By 1977, the Zimbabwe African National Liberation Army, ZANLA, the military wing of Robert Mugabe's Zimbabwe African National Union, had established significant bases across the border in Mozambique, where the collapse of Portuguese colonial rule in 1975 had created a safe haven for guerrilla operations. The largest of these bases was located near Chimoio, approximately 90 kilometers from the Rhodesian border, a sprawling complex that served as ZANLA's operational headquarters. This base was not merely a military outpost but a multifaceted settlement, housing an estimated 9,000 to 11,000 people, including hardened guerrilla fighters, new recruits, political cadres, medical personnel, women, and children. The presence of non-combatants was significant, as Chimoio functioned as a training and ideological hub for ZANLA's revolutionary efforts. Rhodesian intelligence, gathered through aerial reconnaissance and units like the Merciless Scouts, had been tracking the growth of ZANLA's presence in Mozambique. By mid-1977, the Rhodesian Security Forces, RSF, under the command of Lieutenant General Peter Walls, identified Chimoio as a critical target. The base's size and strategic importance made it a threat to Rhodesia's security, as ZANLA used it to train and deploy guerrillas for incursions into Rhodesian territory. The RSF devised Operation Dingo, a daring cross-border raid aimed at crippling ZANLA's capabilities in a single, devastating blow. The operation was meticulously planned, relying on the element of surprise and the combined might of the Rhodesian Air Force and elite ground units. Air Vice Marshal Frank Mussel, commander of the Air Force, coordinated the aerial bombardment, while Colonel Brian Robinson, head of the Rhodesian Light Infantry, and officers from the Special Air Service prepared to lead the ground assault. On the ZANLA side, key figures like Josiah Tongo Gara, the overall commander, and Rex Nongo, a senior military leader, were prime targets, though neither was present at Chimoio during the attack. The Rhodesian plan was audacious. A pre-dawn airstrike on November 23, 1977, followed by a ground assault to mop up survivors and destroy ZANLA's infrastructure. The operation also targeted a secondary base at Tembu, 200 kilometers northeast of Chimoio, in the days that followed. The RSF aimed to disrupt ZANLA's operations, capture weapons, and inflict maximum casualties. However, the presence of thousands of non-combatants at Chimoio raised the specter of significant civilian losses, a factor that would later fuel international outrage and shape the operation's legacy. On the morning of November 23, 1977, Operation Dingo commenced with a devastating aerial assault on the Chimoio camp. At dawn, Rhodesian Air Force Camber bombers and Hunter fighter jets roared over the Mozambican border, unleashing a barrage of bombs, rockets, and cannon fire on the sprawling complex. Helicopter gunships, including Alouette 3s armed with 20mm cannons, followed in successive waves, strafing the camp and targeting fleeing occupants. The initial bombardment was designed to sow chaos and neutralize ZANLA's defenses, which were minimal due to the element of surprise. The camp, spread across multiple sites including farms and training areas, was ill-prepared for an attack of this scale. Many of ZANLA's anti-aircraft weapons were either ineffective or unmanned, leaving the base vulnerable to the relentless air assault. Following the bombardment, Rhodesian elite units descended on Chimoio. Paratroopers from the Rhodesian Light Infantry, commanded by Colonel Brian Robinson, and helicopter-borne troops from the Special Air Service dropped into the camp to engage survivors and secure key objectives. The ground assault was methodical, with troops moving through the complex to destroy infrastructure, seize weapons caches, and eliminate resistance. The Rhodesians faced sporadic opposition from ZANLA fighters, many of whom were caught off guard or killed in the initial strikes. The operation scale was unprecedented, involving nearly 200 Rhodesian personnel, including aircrew and ground troops, supported by a fleet of aircraft that included 10 Camber bombers, 8 Hunter jets, and multiple helicopters. The attack on Chimoio lasted several hours, with Rhodesian forces withdrawing by midday to avoid retaliation from Mozambican forces or ZANLA reinforcements. On November 24th and 25th, the RSF extended the operation to Zimbabwe, a smaller ZANLA base in Tete province. The pattern was similar: airstrikes followed by ground assaults, though Zimbabwe was less densely populated and yielded fewer casualties. Rhodesian reports claimed extraordinary success, estimating over 3,000 ZANLA personnel killed at Chimoio alone, alongside the destruction of significant quantities of arms and ammunition. The RSF suffered minimal losses, with only 2 soldiers killed and a handful wounded across both raids. However, the high casualty figures reported by Rhodesia included a significant number of non-combatants, a fact that would later cast a shadow over the operation's military achievements. Operation Dingo was a tactical triumph for the Rhodesian Security Forces, dealing a severe blow to ZANLA's operational capacity. The destruction of Chimoio and Tete disrupted ZANLA's training and logistics, killed numerous mid-level commanders and recruits, and captured substantial weaponry. From a military perspective, the raid demonstrated the RSF's ability to project power across borders, leveraging superior intelligence, air superiority, and elite ground forces. Lieutenant General Peter Walls and Air Vice Marshal Frank Muscle received praise within Rhodesia for orchestrating a complex operation with minimal losses. However, the operation's success came at a profound humanitarian cost, one that would resonate far beyond the battlefield. ZANLA and ZANU sources reported that thousands of civilians, including women, children, and unarmed recruits, were killed in the Chimoio attack. Independent estimates, while varying, corroborate that a significant portion of the casualties were non-combatants, caught in the indiscriminate bombing and strafing runs. The Rhodesian claim of 3,000 combatants killed was contested, as the camp housed medical staff, political cadres, and families, many of whom had no military role. ZANU labeled the operation the Chimoio Massacre, a term that gained traction internationally as reports of civilian deaths emerged. The attack drew widespread condemnation, particularly from African nations and the international community, who viewed it as a violation of Mozambican sovereignty and a war crime due to the high civilian toll. The massacre had a paradoxical effect on the Rhodesian Bush War. While it temporarily weakened ZANLA, the loss of life galvanized support for the liberation movement. The deaths of civilians and recruits at Chimoio radicalized many Zimbabweans, leading to a surge in ZANLA recruitment in the months that followed. Leaders like Josiah Tongogara and Rex Nongo, who escaped the raid, capitalized on the outrage to bolster their forces, framing the attack as evidence of Rhodesian brutality. By 1978, ZANLA had largely recovered its strength, continuing its guerrilla campaign with renewed vigor. In Zimbabwean history, Operation Dingo remains a deeply controversial event. For Rhodesians, it was a high-water mark of military prowess, showcasing their ability to strike deep into enemy territory. For Zimbabweans, it is remembered as a tragic massacre, emblematic of the excesses of colonial rule. The operation highlighted the moral complexities of the Bush War, where tactical victories often came at the cost of humanitarian principles. Today, Chimoio is a site of remembrance in Zimbabwe, with memorials honoring those killed and survivor testimonies underscoring the human toll. The raid's legacy endures as a stark reminder of the war's brutality and the enduring scars it left on the region.